Angela Rayner spoke at the last cabinet meeting of term about the findings in this work that's been commissioned a year since the riots that were sparked by the Southport attacks on the causes of that unrest. George, tell us a bit about that.
Yes, so Angela Rayner has been investigating this as part of the upcoming plan for neighbourhoods and, as you say, presented the findings to the cabinet. And I think several things jumped out from that. There was a mention of immigration as a factor, but also that 17 of the 18 areas that saw the worst rioting are among the most deprived. And I think she was trying to present a balanced position. She emphasised, on the one hand, that Britain is a successful, in her words, multi-ethnic and multicultural society, but also that there's clear discontent, anger, distrust, and that those underlying factors need to be addressed, or the UK will see further unrest.
It's about the fraying of the social fabric, isn't it?
It is the fraying of the social fabric. I mean, I think there's good in this and less good in this. The good bit is that it has been one of Keir Starmer's mantras that this country is not broken. And that can sound a little bit complacent. And there are certainly parts of the country or aspects of the country which are broken. And therefore, I think to have an honest assessment of that at cabinet level is in itself very useful, because we're going through, a multi-crisis at the moment, a fiscal crisis, a crisis around migration and community tensions, a crisis of crime. In all sorts of directions, you can see problems ahead. And I think a sense of more urgency and in almost more alarm at the heart of government is one of the things we need. I'd say this is a less good operation in the sense that from what we just get the cabinet readouts, we don't get the detailed papers. But from what we know, it's kind of a statement of the blindingly obvious, a lot of it. There is a problem over illegal migration and mass legal migration over the last 10 years. Well, duh. There is a problem about AI beginning to develop. Well, duh. We know that. We've talked about AI and jobs. And also AI is problematic because Peter Kyle and many people inside government would say AI is the answer to everything. So it's both the answer to everything and one of the fundamental problems the country faces. So, yeah, I think it was a useful thing for her to do. From the readout, slightly bland, slightly soft-edged, but at least she says that migration, and in particular illegal migration, is a problem for the social fabric. Because, as we look ahead into this summer, thinking back to last summer, that is for sure.
Well, the key drivers, I suppose, that she found and read out: immigration, economic insecurity, rapid deindustrialization, and just all of us spending more time online and on our phones. And as you say, Andrew, it did feel a little bit like, yes, I think if you had been trying to speculate on what those causes might be without having read the study, you probably would end up in a similar sort of space. But George, how significant is it that they are talking openly in cabinet meetings about migration being sort of a key driver of this unrest? And we've had sort of mixed messages from the government on migration. We had Keir Starmer's infamous Island of Strangers speech, and then he said that he didn't necessarily intend that line to come across the way that it did. I think there were some reports that he hadn't actually read the speech before he gave it. But then, at the same time, some of the content of that speech and the white paper was quite strong and quite a clear departure from previous Labour policy and the policy of previous governments. So, is it significant that we're talking about immigration as one of these core breaking point issues at the last cabinet meeting of the parliamentary term?
Definitely, but I think as you correctly suggest, it's taken on a heightened political significance because of the furore over the Islands of Strangers speech. And I think Keir Starmer withdrew the phrase, then gave subsequent clarifications to the Sun, saying that he otherwise stood by the speech, and it's really muddied the waters on what actually was a fairly clear government position, which was that, and it was articulated by Keir Starmer in his speech at last year's Labour conference, where he said taking back control is a Labour cause. People want control over immigration, and suggesting, this is not a position we have in spite of being a social democratic centre-left party, but because we're one. And just as the state intervenes to address health and education, so it needs to control its borders.
George is absolutely right. I think the problem the government has is so many relatively small-scale announcements about how they were going to close the cross-channel traffic, how they're going to stop it. And again and again and again, we've had, here's what we're doing, and absolutely nothing has happened in the real world. The numbers have gone up and up and up. So, Yvette Cooper says we're going to change the law to smash the gangs. We're going to give officers on the Kent coast more powers and going to give the police more powers. Now, to be fair, that is still going through. But nonetheless, it was announced months ago as a big movement. We've had the deal with the French. We've had the deal with the Germans. We've had this. We've had that. We've had announcements that the French tactics are changing. We've had a deal that we're going to freeze the assets of people smugglers, that we're going to ban people smugglers from coming to the UK, as if they do. And again and again and again, they make these announcements and the numbers of boat arrivals go up and up and up, 50% up this year. And I think that this is really, really dangerous politics because it gives the clear impression that the government doesn't have a grip and doesn't have a plan. And you're now getting the Tories, for instance, saying, well, put Rwanda to one side. What we have to do is we have to have much, much faster deportations. As soon as people arrive on the beaches, they're sent either back to the country they came from, if that's possible, if it's like Pakistan, or to a third country, if it's not possible. To do that, we need to disapply or repeal the Human Rights Act, and we need to look at coming out of the ECHR. Now, we all know that there is absolutely no way at the moment that Keir Starmer or the Labour Cabinet or the Labour Party would do those things. So, in a sense, they're caught between smaller measures they have announced, which so far, maybe it'll change, but so far have made absolutely no difference, and the next series of changes, which they won't go for.
Well, since we're talking about just cabinet and how this has sort of become a sort of headline issue, even for ministers who you wouldn't expect to get involved in it. Andrew, you've also written this week about how the Prime Minister communicates with his top team, or rather
to which the
doesn't.
answer is not much. I mean, the point I'm trying to make is that I think we're only beginning to get the sense of just how different, how unusual, in a sense, how oddball Keir Starmer is as a British Prime Minister, because there's things that a British Prime Minister, we know, has to do. He has to or she has to communicate very, very regularly and deeply with their cabinet. Keir Starmer doesn't. Has to communicate with the backbenches and be seen around the House of Commons regularly. Keir Starmer isn't. Has to obsessively read the press, read the New Statesman, read the Spectator, read the magazines, read the blogs, watch the TV bulletins, be aware of what the media is saying all the time. Keir Starmer couldn't give a monkeys. He turns the other way. So this very odd Prime Minister in that respect. And the fact that he's not communicating with his key ministers is, I think, a problem. And for the very first time, I am picking up people thinking they're not plotting against him or anything like that. That's crude. But they're beginning to think of life beyond Keir Starmer, life beyond Rachel Reeves at some point next year. And I think that's quite ominous for him. But it's real and it's actually going on. I think the other side of all of this is that in a world of kind of pain coming at him from all sides, from the media, endless bad headlines, most people would kind of crumple. Most people would give up quite quickly. Keir Starmer has this sort of self-possession. He looks at himself in the mirror and he thinks about his own history and the way he has overcome problems in the past. He is not much deflected by terrible headlines. He is not much deflected by angry colleagues or critical members of Parliament. And I think over time that means that the big picture, which is that we just grind on year after year after year, more investment comes in, and at some point next year or the year after that, the country will start to feel markedly different. You need an almost insanely imperturbable kind of figure at the top for that to happen, and that may be who we have at the moment.
George, just quickly, you were at the Number 10 summer party on Tuesday night where the Prime Minister spoke. Did you get any signs of that maybe the stress is getting to him a little bit? Was he, like Andrew said, Teflon, everything just bounces off him? What was the mood like?
No, look, it would be a lie to say that the mood was as buoyant for Keir Starmer as after the landslide win last summer, but the jokes by Westminster standards were fairly good.
That is a low bar, to be fair.
He quipped about months of crises, mismanagement, and U-turns, and that's just at the BBC. He enjoyed making fun of Kemi Badenoch, joking about her being ousted by Robert Jenrick, referring to Nigel Farage as the real leader of the opposition. But there are some in Labour who think that they can't afford to laugh too much at Badenoch, as much as that might be justified, because they think talking up Nigel Farage may have some dangers to them. There are others who say actually it's pulling Conservative voters, centrists, Liberal Democrats towards us in some seats, because they do see the choice already as Labour or Farage.